A note to those listening with younger listeners, episode 76 contains no explicit language, but does have mature themes.
Word nerd, wordsmith, wordy, wordless. Oxford Dictionary says a word is a single, distinct, meaningful element of speech or writing, used with others or sometimes alone. We say each one matters. No extra words is literature, minimalist style. And we're getting you right to the story.
Nothing They Could Do by Kim Farley. A dog barked outside the front door. 7 o'clock Monday morning, claws scratching the veranda's timber floor. Barbara beside me looked bemused. The knock on the door was loud in the silence. Mango wisps decorated morning's mother of pearl. The tranquility that had been in our bedroom now only existed in that mango blue sky. The knocking and barking continued. "Look through the window beside the door," Barbara said. A blue heeler was prowling around Tim, another blue heeler's snout protruding from a pickup's half-open passenger-side window in the driveway, dog's eyes glinting like demented silver. Tim tossed a cigarette butt that slipped through a hole in the veranda's aging floor. "Hi," I said, opening the door. Smoke rose from where the butt had fallen, the dog trying to flee into the house, Tim holding it by the collar. Its tongue flapped like a meat windsock in its ebullience breeze, its front paws lifting in the wind of its wildness. The front paws landed upon hallway tarmac, Tim strengthening his grip on the leather around the dog's neck. We made tea. Barbara joined us. Tim smoked. Ash sprayed across the kitchen floor. "I wanted to show you this dog," he said. "I'm going to breed and train them to sell to cattle stations. I've got 2 others. Smoke, quivering off his burning cigarette's end, dissolved into nothing. He'd never mentioned breeding dogs before. He had never even mentioned starting a business. We usually talked about philosophy and travel. He said once I had been the first person to recognize his manic depression. "The doctors," he had said back then, "have finally reached the same conclusion that you reached in 5 minutes. It only took them 2 years." The kettle's whistling mimicked a train racing to match Tim's speeding thoughts. The passionate vibrancy ejected by his irises matched the chiseled glints carved in his dog's eyes. Usually he went to hospital when he reached extremes, but the potential inherent in blue heeler breeding had crushed routine. "I regret the things I do when I hit extreme states," he once said, "so I go straight to hospital." Ash flew across the floor. Tim's thumb frenetically flicked the cigarette's butt. "These dogs are great with sheep and cattle," he continued, "and they're really loyal. They'd die for you." I poured boiling water upon tea bags I'd put in the cups I'd placed on the table. Tim refused to sit. Dog breeding was too exciting for relaxation. His thumb flicking, ash flying, the firmly held cigarette wedged between a stiff index finger and a rigid forefinger, disappearing cigarette smoke leaving behind pungency. Serene immobility made the sky's mango wisps look permanent. I opened a window to let the smoke drift out. "Do you need a license to do it?" I asked. "No, and it's cheap." Dog breeding was so exciting that Tim didn't need reassurance. He tilted his cup quickly, taking rapid gulps. His thumb flicked and flicked, smoke thinning into invisibility, ash shooting from his cigarette's end, the cigarette slowly disappearing. His sudden enthusiasm for life suggested he'd won a great prize after years of effort. He was thin and wiry. His longish hair flopped like wings when he walked, as if his head was a bird trying to take off. "People don't appreciate the potential of this," he said. "Every farm and cattle station in this country could get 2 or 3, and they're excellent for hunting as well." His head bent forward from a long neck, conviction's tongs pulling that head forward, enthusiasm carving the distance his words had to travel. Barbara focused on Tim's clenched fist as Tim repeated, "Every farm and cattle station in this country." I didn't know what to say, except I hope it goes well. I should have said, go to hospital. "Trained blue healers," he said, "can perform complex tasks. They've been undervalued by unjustified prejudices. It's a question of training." Instead of saying, "Go to hospital," I thought, no, he has to work for himself. He can't work for anyone else. He should try this. Barbara's absorbed green irises exuded the startled curiosity of a cat's. "It's true," I said, "that people believe that blue healers are too aggressive. I guess it's a myth." His happiness stopped me from saying what I should have said. The dog's snout twitched, its eyes locating the source of an intriguing odor, its raised triangular ears with sharp apexes like a black trident on its head. Orange-yellow patches like bonfires inflamed the trident's interiors, the dog's teeth bone-white like a shark's, the round holes on its black snout like the ends of a double-barreled gun. Barbara rocked back, gasping, as the dog raced past her, charging towards a kitten that had emerged from our bedroom. Her cat had recently had kittens. She and Tim chased the dog, the kitten ending up prostrate, squealing. Tim pulled the dog away, front paws rising, restrained dog neck stretching as the dog tried prolonging his attack. Barbara stroked the injured feline. I stroked her neck as she stroked the cat. "Oh, God," she said. She picked up the kitten, whose name was Spot. The large, round black spot on Spot's white left flank resembled a black moon in white heavens. Spot's injuries were internal. There were now 3 internally injured people in the room. "I'll take it to a vet now," Tim said. Barbara's mouth stiffened with pain. Spot wasn't moving. Blood colored Spot's mouth, his half-closed eyes distant with anguish. The dog's energy contrasted with Spot's sickened bewilderment. I'd never seen disillusionment in a cat's eyes before. It looked unearthly. When I came home from work that afternoon, the veranda was half black, smelling of burnt wood. Barbara said, "They had to put Spot down. I'm going to miss that snowy fur, and that little pink nose, and those creamy whiskers, and those gorgeous emerald eyes. But there was nothing they could do." She had planned to keep Spot and give away the other kittens. I hugged her as she added, "Tim didn't stop explaining to the vet his plans for blue healers. The vet said another person was waiting." She had to repeat this 3 times. Back here, smoke was rising from the veranda. The fire brigade was arriving. Someone had rung them. Tim's cigarettes had caused the fire. "I'd never seen him in a manic phase before," I said. "He usually checks himself in when he hits extremes. Normally he's logical and sensitive. He said I was the first person to realize he's manic-depressive. He said the doctors hadn't had a clue." Luck means winning in life's random alignment of atoms. He also said, I added, that in normal phases he feels guilty because of his behavior in extreme phases. This guilt is tremendous for someone as sensitive as he is. People thought the head-on collision with a road train on a county highway that killed him had been an accident. At the funeral, stunned by senseless random misfortune, his mother wailed, "There's no God who cares." I should have insisted he go to hospital, but it probably wouldn't have done any good. But I still should have insisted. When a religious auntie told the irreligious niece, Tim's mother, that this was God's will, that some sensible decision had been made, Tim's mother's revolving head almost detached itself from her neck as she howled, "Christ!" Tim had left a message on my answer machine, apologizing for the day of the dogs that I hadn't responded to. God or no God, there was no excuse for not responding.
It has been 2 weeks since Arden fell madly in love with a man they glimpsed in an Albrecht Dürer engraving, St. Jerome depicted in his study. Tonight Arden is alone, drowsing in their room, bed, blankets, afraid to sleep because last time they slept, a few hours ago, they were awoken by a panic made out of hopelessness, and they called campus safety, and 3 large, uniformed men came into their dorm room carrying heavy bags of equipment and told them to take some deep breaths and sign a form. Arden is in their own room, alone. Arden's girlfriend of 15 months, Simone, is down the hill in her room. Arden had been living there with her, in the room down the hill. Simone and Arden shared 15 months in tight orbit of one another, drawing closer and closer, as massive objects in space do, when they both fall into the same divot in the space-time continuum. And, as massive objects in space do, though they displace the weight of one another, the larger object will exert a stronger gravitational force on the smaller one. Arden can't stand to live there any more, in the room down the hill, in the corners, in the constant gravity of such a massive body. Seeking something now to fill the awful emptiness of the room, to distract from the awful fullness of Arden's head, they turn on the internet. The internet is buzzing, set on transistor radio. Arden taps keys and adjusts the angle of the blue-glowing, blank laptop screen to catch the right frequency. There is a humming, and then a woman's voice comes through. It is a melancholy voice, speaking from the sound aisles of a library.
Hello, my name is Chris Baker Dersch, and if you can hear my voice, dear listener, that means that the witching hour of the night has come. It means that the sun is switched off and slid out of sight under the lip of the bowl that is our world, and in the dark houses and streets, in the dark towns and the dark city apartments and the silent subways and the corridors through which planets and stars move in nighttime perambulations, you and I are the only two people awake. You are my only witness. You exist in abstraction, you in your space, and me in mine. Between us is another space, somewhere suspended, dependent on you, that you continue to listen. This is where we met, and I am here to tell you a story, dear listener. It's your first night alone. Your bedroom is a big and empty shoebox full of light, and outside it is dark. You lie on your bed. The window is open. The night air is cold, and it washes at your skin like a tide of cold water coming in, but you can't close it. You can barely move. Too weak to close the window, and you can't stand the idea of trying to live without that tide of cold air coming in. Your body is heavy with tiredness, but your mind will not allow you to rest. You are drinking coffee. You brewed it in a little French press with water from the plastic electric kettle that your sister told you was carcinogenic. You sip the steaming, cancerous caffeine water, and your heart throbs and hums and shudders, and with it you eat a bar of sugary dark chocolate. The sugar will attack the most vulnerable parts of your body, and the cocoa will cause your face to flare red the next morning. You enjoy this fourfold torment of your body: caffeine, cancer, cocoa, candida. You remember that George Orwell believed that real coffee and real chocolate were necessary rites for the happiness of the spirit. You wonder why every indulgence that makes your spirit happy makes your body so unhappy. You have a longing, an inexpressible desire for something. You eat all the time when you aren't hungry. Your eyes lock on the faces of strangers, trying to recognize them. You have a desperate desire to have something beyond the physical act of holding. You want a person who is a concept. You don't want him to be real. You don't want to possess him. You want to wish to possess him, and feel the lack, the desperate emptiness of his absence. You want to be in pain. There is a hole inside your mind, a pit where your thoughts can choose to tread, or choose to tread around, and every time you step into the pit, sink gratefully into the pit. You look out the window onto Olive Street. The dim orange light from the street lamps infuses the air more than it truly illuminates anything. The street is empty. Your eyes are looking for a figure walking down the street, the tall, thin figure of a man. You want only to glimpse him, like the mythical creature that he is. You are imagining that your saint is uncloistered, that he is not a holy man, but an ordinary one. Would you want him then? Yes, yes. That he walks the streets like ordinary men, and you could happen upon him there. Saint Jerome, not an aged and balded and bearded man like the old masters depicted him to be, as if age was the proof of the venerable wisdom of the philosopher, as if the bald spot on that old pate were the access point of divine inspiration, and the years of knowledge were growing out of his head in the pure white strands of that beard. Saint Jerome is still a young man in this story, clean-faced and clear-eyed, eyes that are accustomed to reading and looking closely at small things, but also taking in vast things from a distance. A body that knows the world, hands that hold skill. He walks in long natural strides, looks only ahead, and through the window, carried to you on the night air, is a thin thread of his scent. You dash to put on some clothing. Quickly, quickly, before he disappears, find anything and put it on. You call out, "St. Jerome!" leaning, almost falling out of the window, and his head turns and finds you, and he is surprised and smiles and says, "Hey, Arden." And you call to him, "Wait," and you force yourself to put on shoes because you know that he would object if you don't, even though you want to feel the cold concrete ripping at the soles of your feet. And you find a sweatshirt, and you wonder if you look okay, and you wonder if it matters. And you run, almost falling, with headlong momentum down the stairs, and you come out into the night, hoping that he'll still be there, and there he is, paused and lingering at the corner as if not really sure if he should stay. You go to him. You are flushed and beaming and breathing hard from your rush tumble down the stairs, and he can't help but smile back. You ask, "Are you just on a nighttime walk?" "Yeah, I couldn't sleep, so I decided to go out," he responds. You ask, "May I walk with you?" And you look very carefully at him to see if you are imposing, and he smiles and says, of course, it'd be nice to have someone to talk to." And you wonder what he would do if you took your shoes off. You can see all this so clearly. But he is asleep now, remember, dear listener? It is only you and I out here. This fragile space we are sharing exists only at the witching hours of the night. Only at these empty, unwatched hours when time is unaccounted for and inexplicable things are allowed to happen. Why did you decide to be awake at such an hour, listener?
I don't know.
The night is treading on, into those desperate hours of blurry eyes and heavy limbs, and the fleeting impressions of animals flitting past corners in the peripheral vision. You are suspending the time, pretending that it goes on like this forever. You desire to reach that special node of time in the night when reality is distorted, and you believe, divorced from what you rationally know, that you will reach, grasp, find, have something when you get there. Every night you wander into the night looking for that time. Tomorrow you will have the gray face of a keel-hauled sailor dragged up, and your stomach will slosh all bilge water, and your brain will rattle around in your head, and you will regret this. But right now you don't believe in the morning. You have no proof that it will ever come, and you don't care if it does or doesn't.
There is a silence, and Chris seems to be waiting for Arden. Arden stands to their knees on the bed and looks out the window. From dark bedroom into nightlit streets and neighborhood backyards and tree branches. Arden's heart is fluttering from panic and pain, and their throat seems constricted, and the air moves through too slowly and not enough, even as they try and suck in more. They are empty and desire to be filled. The thin glass shell that forms their body rings hollowly inside with the air that Arden desperately draws in. Somewhere outside of the window is the concept of him, or an idea even more ephemeral, a longing that Arden has buried under turbulent romantic desire in order to compensate for its lack of physicality or understandability. It is there, out there in the night, hanging, with a ghostly glimmer, unknowable, unseeable, lack. Arden presses their hands to the glass of the window, and then their mouth, crushing their lips to the cold and unyielding surface in a kiss. They breathe and press, and they stare through and try to see, and then they close their eyes and feel the coldness of the glass seeping into their overheated skin and deeper in to cool their fluttering heart. Arden pulls away from the glass and looks at the oily symmetrical prints of nose and cheek and chin framed by the mark of the hands. The white plumes of breath like inverted lungs hung on the glass, rising from the wet marks of condensation outlining remembered mouth, open, and nostrils, illuminated all by the streetlights outside. The impression fades.
Hello there. Welcome to No Extra Words. This is Chris Baker-Dersch. I'm your producer and editor. Today's episode is one of those heavier ones where it's a little bit hard to do a commentary because I don't want to pull you completely out of the mood that you've been in. My initial vision was to come on after Kim Farley's story, tell you a little bit about what was going to happen, and then come back afterwards and kind of debrief. But after recording Kim's story, I was like, I can't bust in on that. I can't bust in on the conclusion to that story and pull you out of there and then try to put you back in. Plus, I will admit, I kind of liked the idea of shocking you with my voice in the middle of a story unprepared. So there's a whole lot going on, and I don't want to walk on either one of these marvelous pieces of fiction. Except to say that today's episode is really about the things we reach for to handle, things we shouldn't have to handle, but we do have to handle because it's this human condition that we're in. In terms of Arden's story, how that came to be, Arden is a former contributor to the show, was on last summer, and Arden wrote me an email saying that they had written this story after going through a hard time and listening to the show, and thought maybe I would like to air it, or maybe it was weird and I would like to ignore them, and I was excited. So we're taking a break from the Writing Spaces segment to do You Are the Producer, starring Arden Wren Sawyer, because Arden came up with the idea for this and the conception for this, and so it was sort of, I handed segment producing for this episode over to Arden. I would be delighted to bring back You Are the Producer if someone else out there has a marvelous idea of what we can bring, but I will tell you, you can't steal that idea, because that one's been done already. So, thank you, Arden, for that. My husband was so funny. I said to him today, as we were walking, I said, I get to go home and record my half of a story one of my contributors wrote me into the show. And he said, that sounds a lot like sucking up. I think they just wanted to be on your show. And I said, I really don't care, because the idea of getting to star in a story, and it wasn't just a simple throwaway story either. The idea of getting to star as this voice that exists in this person's head at this time in their life, I couldn't pass that opportunity up. This is where I get to put on my announcements hat, and we step away from the heaviness of the episode for just a minute so I can tell you all the things that are going on before I try to get you back into the mood for the last, which is also the shortest, piece in this story, which is coming at the end. So I've given myself a hard job today, but apparently I'm up for it, because apparently I'm the middle of the night radio host that comes into your head through the internet screen at night, at least according to Arden. Two big announcements. The first is I really want to do an opening day of baseball again, just because that's something that I enjoyed putting together last year, but I need your help in doing it. So if anybody out there has a baseball story or a baseball poem, please send those to me by March 15th so that can happen. That's at noextrawords@gmail.com. The details are at noextrawords.wordpress.com. There's a pinned post right up there that tells you what we're trying to do and what we're looking for. I want to make this one go, but I can't if I don't have another piece or two to put in it. So if you've got baseball stories, or if you have a writer friend who has baseball stories, they can be fiction, creative nonfiction, or poetry. As long as they're in short form, it doesn't matter to me what they are. It's April. We can totally do poetry. So that's something that's going on. The other thing that's happening, our fantastic podcast host, the great folks at Libsyn, that's libsyn.com if you ever want to start a podcast, are doing a promotion along with some other podcast hosts throughout the month of March. And it's not about us, the podcasters, it's about you, the podcast listeners. So what they're asking you to do is share a podcast you love with somebody who doesn't listen. This can be your mom, your neighbor, the guy at the butcher shop, whoever it is in your life that you think would benefit from a podcast you love. It can be this show or some other favorite show that you have. Just tell them what a podcast is and tell them why they should listen. Even take their phone out of their hand and show them how they can subscribe. It's really easy. And then when you do that, if you can give us a little bit of social media love and post on social media that you did this, the hashtag they're using is hashtag trypods, TRYPODS for this. And you can also hashtag noextrapod to let us know that you did. And they're going to send some love out to shows that get the message out. And who knows, we may pass that love on to listeners of ours to get the message out. So that's happening in the month of March. Now I take a deep breath and try to pull you back into the mood of this episode The last story of the episode is somewhat different from the two that we started with, but I think the thing that the three really have in common is you can't escape from who you are. You can't escape from your life circumstances. No matter how much you move on from something, no matter how much you grow and change, there are certain things that are always going to be a part of you, for better or for worse. And in this story, I find myself, without going into too much detail, because of course you haven't heard it yet, I find myself left at the end with this main character, and I really want to be able to help her let go, but I know she never will. She is who she is. She will always be who she is, no matter what she's trying to do or trying to move on from. And I think that's true of Arden. In the second story, which I actually never gave you the name of, the second story is Caffeine, Cancer, Coco Candida, which is a great title. And Arden is the same way. Arden is themselves, no matter what happens, and you actually hear my voice in that story pull Arden out of this illusion that they are someone else. And at the beginning, you have the main character, the voice in Kim Farley's story, who's doing the same thing, who is, no matter what happens from here on out, this is a thing that is always going to be real and is always going to be with them. Policy, which is coming up next, is sort of the final bow that ties it all together. So thank you for being with me on a somewhat odd and unusual episode for us, but I've had a ton of fun doing it. And I will see you next time here on No Extra Words, your Flash Fiction podcast. You guys take care.
The girl shuffled into Miss Littell's office at 9:30 Tuesday morning in a denim bib dress. She had rounded shoulders and wide hips, and scowled at her boots as if they were too heavy for her to lift. In school, Miss Littell had been sociable, pretty, and popular, and in a flash she imagined this girl's very different experience, smoking cigarettes behind the parking lot dumpster, slouching home alone, her head down, after a school dance. "You're Miss Littell, the assistant principal? I'm Christine Chisholm." "Yes, please call me Maria. Do you prefer Chris, or maybe Chrissy?" "Christine works." She sat and dropped her bag beside her on the floor. "You know what I came down for?" "Yes, I believe we're having a little trouble with your son, Charlie. He's having trouble with this place. Could you give me a little bit of background?" "I've been through all this," Christine said. "When he goes into the bathroom, there's always boys in there picking on him. They tell him he's a freak or whatever." "I'm sorry," Miss Littell said. "I'm just trying to picture Charlie." "He's not too tall yet. He's slim. He has blonde hair." Christine touched her head. "He's quiet. He's neat. I let him pick all his own clothes. He wears a lot of stripes. He always washes his hands any time after he pees or anything." "Oh, yes," Miss Littell said. "I know him. He's a cute kid. He's funny. He's very sweet." She looked at the forms on her desk and thought of a former classmate, a heavy, slumping girl with thick glasses, stumblingly shy, too easy for a pack of pretty, athletic girls to aim one-liners at. "So it's a bullying issue?" Christine wrinkled her nose. "I wondered if you had a policy regarding that." "It's something we're working towards, yes. Do you know the other boys involved?" "My Charlie's not a tattle." "We could have a talk with them if you did," Miss Littell said. "We could hear their side." "Oh, I see how you're trying to work this. These kids have connections. You're just sweeping under the rug." "Well, we do have to hear from all sides. I'm sure you understand how it works." "My son is coming home to me in tears." "Now, Christine," Miss Littell thought of striped little Charlie Chisholm, head down, afraid to look anyone in the eye, sniffing his fingers as he shuffled out of the boys' room. "Sometimes there are certain social issues to be worked out on both sides," she said. "There's not always blame involved." "I remember your type," Christine cried, suddenly rising and hoisting her bag over her shoulder. "I know all about you." "I'm sorry, I know people can be cruel." "Yes, people like you." She stormed toward the door. "You'll hear from me again through the school board." Miss Littell jumped up from her desk and ran out, but by the time she got to the door, Christine was down the hall, almost to the exit, stomping now instead of shuffling. Miss Littell couldn't help but call out her name as she kicked off her heels and ran after her.
Thanks for listening to the No Extra Words podcast. For more information on today's stories and contributors, or to learn how to submit your own work, please visit us at noextrawords.wordpress.com. The best support you can give the show is to recommend us to your family and friends. See you next time.